Hi, everyone. Welcome to Around the Ladder. I'm Erika Steinberg, and this is the podcast about career paths that don't follow the usual script. We've all heard about climbing the corporate ladder, but careers often zigzag, they stall, they take unexpected turns. If your journey hasn't been a straight climb, you're in the right place. I love the idea of going around the ladder and finding a path that fits who you really are. So, on this show, I get to speak with people who have taken unconventional routes, by choice or by chance, and they found success on their own terms. My guest today is Charlie Birch. Charlie is the founder of Humanized Collective and creator of Brand IDQ. We will talk about what that is. A dance choreographer and mental health professional turned brand consultant, Charlie works with founder led businesses that are ready to shift to team driven growth without losing themselves. Using her Brand IDQ framework and in collaboration with Humanized Collective's talented vendor network, Charlie helps founders tease their identity apart from their brand and take meaningful steps that allow the business to take on a life of its own in all the best ways. Charlie, I'm so glad to have you here, and I'm very excited to learn more about Brand IDQ because, as I told you before we hit record, I feel myself being catapulted right into your lap to take me through the same process. But welcome, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And I've one of the things I've had a really fun time doing this past couple of months as I've been on more shows is using our system to create these custom bios for each show. And so that is my bio for your show.
Oh, I
And
love
I
it.
have not heard it read back to me yet, so it landed well. I'm happy with my work in that way. And thank you for reading
Okay.
out loud.
Thank you. Well, usually I do start with a guest's early career, but I want to go even further back with you because of the bit of sleuthing that I did. And I want to start with your parents' career and how that shaped your direction. Would you tell me a bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. So, my parents were business partners of a healthcare management consulting firm. They also had a third partner out of DC in the late 70s into the late 90s. So, my dad was the president, my mom was the vice president, my dad was the salesman, my mom was the operator and the integrator. And so, while my dad was, gallivanting around the earth, schmoozing with all of his government and diplomatic people. My mom was home doing all the things my dad promised everybody that they could do. And one of the stories that I really love to tell about the difference between my mom and my dad, which is, I'm kind of like right in the middle of their strengths. Like I'm a good executor and I'm also a good, big thinker and I like to be in the public eye, but my brother worked for my parents for a period of time where he essentially just followed my dad around and was like his second hand guy and they traveled together and had fun and whatever. But my brother tells this story that my dad walked into a boardroom one time, sat down at the head of the table, like very like hands on the table, executive posture, and said, "All right, guys, what can we do for you?" And they talked at him for about an hour and he stood up and he said, "All right, we can do that." And he shook everybody's hand and he said, "We have a deal." And they said, "Yeah, send over the paperwork." And he walked out the parking lot and my brother said, "Dad, we don't know how to do any of those things." And he said, "That's okay. Carrie will figure it out."
Your
He
mom?
said, they're going to pay us to find the people who will do it. And I think,
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of businesses get stuck is that like there really is a value of just hiring someone to facilitate on your behalf the things
Yeah.
that need to happen and to be able to hire the right people. And my dad was really good at that, at earning people's trust really quickly around large investments of time and energy and finding the right people. And later in his career, after they sold their business, he started a band and he was the front man. I mean, he was easily the least talented person in the band,
I
but
was
he's
going to,
the
could
most
he sing?
memorable person in the band. Like no one in the community is like, "Oh, remember that keyboard guy?" No, they know my dad, right? But so as I was growing up, my parents, they worked a lot, like a lot. Like most of my memories of my dad are him coming and going with a suitcase with like 3 or 4 weeks at a time of him being absent. We had this globe in our house where we would put pins where he was because we didn't have Zoom or cell phones
Yeah.
or, he was just gone. And when he was home, he was very engaging, but he was like tired, from all this traveling. And then my mom, we lived in Columbia, Maryland, which is a suburb of essentially a suburb of DC, and their office was in Silver Spring. And it should have taken like a 20-30 minute drive, but her commute because of traffic, even then,
Oh, yeah.
was like 2.5 hours each way with no cell phone, all right? So like most of my memories of my mom as a child in my early life are like her picking us up or dropping us up from our nanny's house, her taking me home and putting me to bed, and like, me pretending to be asleep in the bed where I could see her like up late working in her office, or her taking us back to her office and putting us to sleep on the air mattress in her office, right? But then at the same time, because my parents were older, when they sold their company in 298, I guess, 1998, we retreated to our beach house in Ocean City, New Jersey, and they were essentially retired for my entire high school career, my entire college career. And so I had this really interesting tension growing up of like parents who were complete workaholics, completely unavailable, and then my more like memorable but less formative years, they were just like kind of chilling, like doing whatever
Yeah.
they wanted all the time. And it creates this really interesting like set of expectations for me in my adulthood of like, how do I create the same kind of financial affluence for my children without being absent?
Yeah.
How do I create the same kind of lifestyle freedom that I saw my parents enjoy while also like establishing myself as a professional? And then I had my own health challenges too, which is how I ended up entering into the remote work world, entering into the gig space, entering into the startup space, and ending up with a very ball of yarn kind of career. Like if you've ever seen an accurate example of the London Underground, like the map they have is grid, but really in
Yeah.
real life, there's like a picture of what it really looks like, and it's like super squiggly
Matrixy.
and like it
Yeah.
looks like that. Like that's the visual I have of my career path of.
Oh my goodness. So now I do want to take a tour of your professional life because you've done a lot. I do want, one of the things that stood out to me is the somatic counseling that you've done. So tease a little bit of that because I do want to dig into that more a little bit later, but t take us on a tour of your professional life.
Sure. So, because my parents work so much and my childcare situation was like a patchwork quilt, my sister was a dancer. She dropped me off, or my babysitter would drop me off at dance, and my sister would pick me up and take me home. And so I started dancing when I was 3 years old. And when we moved here to New Jersey, I continued to dance. My mom, in her retirement, started a charter school where I went for dance performance as my high school major. I did my undergrad in dance performance and choreography. And then I went to graduate school at a Buddhist university in Boulder, Colorado called Naropa University. And I did the first 2 years of that 3 year master's program before I realized that getting a counseling license was going to pin me down regionally in a way that I wasn't prepared for. And I also had a lot of boundary work I needed to do before I was going to like hang my sign as a therapist would like, come
Good.
don't crap on me all over the rest of my life, which is how I got into the coaching space. But the somatic work, um, I backed into a little bit for my own healing process of
Mhm.
discovering that I was burned out at 14 from living the way my parents lived. Like I had back problems, and I finally figured out like, oh, this is a chronic freeze response. This is like I'm an insane person who can't calm down, who can't sit still, who, has all kinds of earn your worth thing programs running. And when I figured that out, the way to heal that was through body-centered therapies. Um, and I wanted to stay in touch with my dance background. So it's like, okay, let me go to school for dance therapy. And that's one of the best things I ever did for myself. And I use that work now because like I think a big gap in that we see in like that I see with brand from conception to execution is that like we kind of just project it onto digital assets and like forget that it has to be a lived
Yeah.
commitment too. Like what does that look like to embody? And again, with that teasing a part of the founder, like the founder kind of knows that instinctively, but like how do you operationalize that in a way for your team that doesn't become like robotic? So it's very relevant. I feel like I'm really in a full circle moment right now. Like for a long time, I felt like going in all these directions. And like, oh yeah, here I am doing Jungian psychotherapy work for businesses, for the identity of the business. I mean, it's
But now it feels like, oh, so now I see the process. Sometimes you don't see a full process for what it is until you come to the end of it. And you're like, that's why I was going in that direction. And now you see it kind of come around like this. Like, ah, okay, now I understand. And thank
yeah,
goodness you went with it for
yeah.
such a long time because it's
Well,
so
you know,
clear at the beginning.
a lot of it felt like an accident or like a. Did you ever read the book The Surrender Experiment?
No.
I'm gonna blank on the author's name, but he has another really famous book. But he was a meditator, and he's like, I just kept saying yes to the out. Like I gave up the idea that I was gonna like pursue a specific path, and I just was like, the path is in front of me, and he just like said yes to every opportunity that presented itself, and it's a really great book if
Yeah.
that's read by the author and really great. But you know, it is kind of that. It was like, okay, I don't want to finish grad school because this internship that I got is not. It was like if there is the universe reaching out of the sky and being like, turn left, turn left, stop going right, stop going right. And like the only way I could stop and give myself permission to drop out of grad school was to get this internship working 45 minutes away from where I lived in the complete opposite direction of everywhere else I would ever go, working with male juvenile sex offenders in a residential facility where I had to live there essentially 3 days a week as a 27 something, you know, not to toot my own horn, but like attractive female. Like, why would I do that to
Yeah.
myself? Like, why would I do
What am
that
I
to myself?
thinking?
And I was just like, this is a sign from the universe that I cannot continue. This is not the right path for me. It wouldn't be this hard and feel this mismatch. So
Mhm.
I just was like, okay. And I didn't really know what I was going to do. And that just happened to be the same week I dropped out of grad school, was the same week of startup week in Boulder. And my friend was like, come to this event. And I was like, okay. And I was like, entrepreneurship. What's that? Like, I didn't know my parents were entrepreneurs. I had never heard the word before, you know? Like, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. These people are just doing like, they have cool ideas and they're doing projects. I'm good at projects. Let me start some projects and see what happens.
So what was the first
Here we go.
one? I mean, I met you when you had third eye. What was the
Mhm.
first one?
The first one was burnout prevention coach,
That's one
which
that sounds like you could
I,
resurrect it, or you probably have resurrected it already and
yeah,
you're
a little bit, right. So it's like I was really into Ayurvedic medicine at the time. Work-life harmony was starting to like kick work-life balance to the curb. You know, that was like it was like Instagram wasn't a thing yet. Facebook was thing, you know, freeconferencecall.com, like which Chris referenced on our first episode of our podcast. That was really popular. It was that era. And I was like, I'll be a burnout prevention coach. Like I figured out how to do that, but I learned really quickly that people do not buy prevention. They
Yeah,
should, but
yeah,
they don't.
yeah.
So that was the first iteration. And while I was doing that, because I didn't want to get a job because I like looked into the job market and I was like, none of these things really like feel right. I got this, I started engaging with this woman in Boulder whose name is Mukara Meredith, and she has a model called Matrix Works. She worked for Mattel Toys, like she did like team building and consulting for creative teams. And she had this model called Matrix Works, which basically said, you know, teams are living systems. The definition of a living system in biology is divergent pieces converging to make a self-correcting whole. And the stages of that cycle are connection, chaos, consciousness. That's the model.
Okay.
And I thought this is so fascinating. I'm going to become a corporate consultant. And so then I tried that, but no one wanted to hire a 20 something corporate consultant with no corporate experience. So that didn't work either. But again, while I was doing that, I was like, I worked for a guy on the Front Range who had essentially like his own version of BNI with multiple chapters, and I was
Uh-huh.
his executive assistant, and I handled like the onboarding for new members and member account management. And then I um, worked for a product promotion company, a food product promotion company as like a multi-brand ambassador and did food demos in Whole Foods and learned about, visual brand. And so I did all these kind of gig things to try to remain free to work on my business as much as I wanted to. And as I did that, I started to realize there was certain things I liked more than my
Mhm.
business. And then when we moved back here to New Jersey, had all these like kind of random things, and we got into real estate investment to like figure out how we were going to afford to live in New Jersey where my family was because the economy here is garbage. And so we were Airbnb hosts. We had a long-term rental property that paid our mortgage. And I was like looking around. I was like, all these businesses that I grew up patroning that like I really love and they're the fabric of the community.
Yeah.
They have horrible websites to the point where it's like a giant FU to the customers to make them have to deal with that bad of a website. And it's like I could just see how it was hurting them. And so I started doing that. And then I met you. And then I realized that when I hang my sign as a website designer and I have to back up into brand because people don't have that done,
Yeah.
that even though I give them something that's like, this is your whole brand, because they hired me as a producer, they don't really see me as a strategist, even if they engage with me as a strategist. They don't see me as a strategist.
Oh.
They're not in the mindset of hiring a strategist. And also, they have this kind of like blinders on, like, this is my website brand. And so my clients would take all this work that they invested in and like not do anything with it, which wasn't good for them, but it also wasn't good for me because I couldn't point to any meaningful results over time.
Yeah.
So we backed up again, and now we're in Humanize.
So when as Third Eye in your work with that, I remember, I think that you said it was Main Street businesses, as your work evolved there, and then you started Humanize. What gap did you see that you could fill with Humanize? Because to me, it not only fills a gap for the consumer, for the client, but it also provides a really nice framework for the people who you're working with and the people who are working for the clients.
Yeah, yeah. So when I had Third Eye, I had also a sales coach at the time, and he kept poking me, you need to monetize your network. You need to monetize your network. You're a natural connector, like blah, 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 right? So I was like, okay, all of my clients need 25 other things. So why don't I build a really formal referral program, right? And I did that. And Laurel, who she was one of my very first vendors that I had in that referral network. Tiffany Donaldson, who is still with us, is a trademark attorney. She was one of our first early vendors, and a couple other people in the, South Jersey, New York's, Marilyn Gibbs, some people that were with me in that world. But what I noticed was that um, that particular model really caused the energy to dissipate. So, like, I would get a client and I would be like, yes, I'll work with you. But before I can work with you, you need to go over here, over here, over here, and over here, and then come back to me. And people just get distracted, or they
Yeah.
run out of money, or, they get like in touch with this person before this person when they really should have done this work first. And before you know it, the business owner is a project manager of a bunch of lanes of expertise they don't know anything about, and they have conflicting intake, like redundant discovery processes and, conflicting deliverables, that redundant services that like kind of challenge each other, and it was just clunky.
Too much, too much. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, what if I turned it inside out, and instead of running an agency, which has many problems in terms of giving the creatives involved the ability to build their portfolio, to charge fair rates, to, you know, get relationships with the clients, we started the collective. So it's essentially a referral network, but instead of sending my clients out, I pull the vendors in.
Yeah.
And the vendors who are part of our collective earn a percentage of the revenue for the sales that they help to generate. So instead of it just being like a nominal referral fee, they essentially own 5% of the client account, and all the revenue that's generated. And every single vendor is client facing, has a client facing brand, and is free to use that lane of work in their portfolio as, they don't have to say, oh, I was a freelancer at Humanize. They can say I was a collaborative partner with Humanize and we worked on this client account and here's what we did.
Hmm.
And here's how you can, and they can track the impact of their collective results over time and point to the return on investment of their work in a way that they wouldn't if the client just kind of like didn't really do all the work, therefore didn't optimize potential, and they lost touch with each other over time and they
Yeah.
didn't know like how it all played out, right? Um, and so that's been really interesting because we have to be very specific about like partnering with people who have niched well, right? Like because it doesn't make sense for me to partner with a person who wants to be a generalist because then they kind of take over.
Yeah.
But it's also been a really interesting because now I have to not only communicate really clearly with our audience, but I have to really communicate very clearly with our vendors about what is a good project to bring in. And they need to really trust that I'm going to close the deal. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? They're like, bring me your business and I'll make it bigger is like a
Yeah.
scary thing to do if you're nervous about client budget, if you're, feeling like, there's not a lot of stability in the economy and people aren't investing. And it's like, I'm going to have a hard time closing a $3,000 package and you want me to bring them to you and sign them up for 25,000, $24,000 worth of work. Like, yes, I do, because it's in the client's best interest and it's in your best interest. But people need to really trust me. And that's been harder to building those relationships is a heavier lift than I expected for
Yeah.
that reason.
And then what's the benefit to the client?
The benefit to the client is they have a dedicated project manager. They have a dedicated creative director overseeing all the different applications of brand. So from the very beginning, instead of going to, someone like Laurel who's focused on messaging and then coming to someone like me who's focused on visuals and then hiring a funnel builder, we're all doing that together. So they're from the very beginning, the plan is cohesive. They can see the arc of service over time. Um, and, they don't have to recruit and vet the people. They don't have to manage the project. They don't have 17 different invoices coming. The timelines don't conflict. Like we had one client right at the end of Third Eye, right before I switched to Humanize, where Laurel worked on this project with me too. It was a physically located business that was opening for the first time. And so the space couldn't be photographed until it was open. But the business owner wanted to, create a presence in anticipation of the opening so that she had some momentum once the business opened. So, she hired a graphic designer separate, and then we built out the visual identity but then we didn't talk to the interior designer. So I got the first mock-ups of the interior design and it like had no relationship to the visual identity we had just developed because she didn't think to have those things work together. And then I was like, okay, where are we going to back up the digital brand to match the physical space or like what are we going to do here? And then when I built out the website, I used all stock photography, but I made a shot list for the photographer who could then go and, take the right pictures. And I sent her the shot list and it would have been like, here, we need 100 exact shots. That's more than we needed, honestly. We needed like 25 exact shots. And what I got back from the photographer because she didn't give him the shot list or he didn't read the shot list or whatever was like 500 candid pictures from the opening party. And it was just like a blurry animal flying by and like, and the way the website was done, like, you just redid your website. Like you have to be really thoughtful about where the picture is going to go and like is it in a graphic frame and like is it going to have text over it and so like all of that was stuff that I worked through And then she had 500 pictures and we couldn't use any of them.
Oh,
Like they were not usable. And it was like, okay, so that happened. And then, if you, for example, we have another client who um, runs a family foundation. They do scholarship for ROTC people who are, military bound in honor of their son who passed away. And they they do a golf fundraiser. So they have like their website, they have a golf fundraiser, they wanted to sell merchandise. And when I first took over like the management of their brand, their graphic designer, they just hired a t-shirt person who had an in-house graphic designer, but they didn't use the brand guide. So like the visuals on the merchandise had no relationship to the
yeah.
visuals on the website, and it just starts to erode with visuals. You can have 10 really great things, but if they don't match,
They don't connect.
it doesn't connect. But and it's not even like, oh, it doesn't look professional, but on some level, it makes people go, are these people like, do they have integrity?
Or
Right?
what
And
is
it's
this
like
even
those
about?
implicit, those pieces where like people can't quite put their finger on what makes them go, they're the most dangerous ones
Yeah.
because they might
Where
not even
it's
realize and they make
disconnected.
up a story.
Yeah. Because if it feels disconnected when you are interacting with the brand, if it feels disconnected to you, what else is going to feel disconnected?
Right, right.
And that's where the danger lies.
And if
And
you aren't
I
paying attention to yourself, why should I pay attention to
yeah,
you?
yeah. And that is something, as somebody who's founded a business, that is something that you can get pulled away from. Laurel always reminds me, she's looked at some of the stuff that I put together and she's like, this is not on brand. I'm like, shoot, you're right, you're right. So then I go back and I pull up my notes. I'm like, you're right. So,
Yeah,
but she knows that she can say that to me, and she also knows that I'll listen
right.
90% of the time. Sometimes I'm just moving too fast.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think it's especially challenging if you're like moving your business in a new direction, if you're trying a new strategy, if you're looking for a new source of clients, or you have because where do you look for inspiration? You look out into the marketplace of like what's working. And one of the things that we've really looked at is how do you determine if a strategy is on brand?
mhm.
Right? It's not that like, do you have a brand strategy? It's like, do you have a brand that's got enough logic that you can determine if a new strategy being suggested to you by a business coach or a colleague or your industry or a platform is on brand for you? Because even if it works, if it's not an aligned strategy, it's going to produce misaligned results. Even if they're great results, they might not be the right results for your business.
How
And a
can
lot of
that
times
lead
that
you
looks like the
astray?
wrong client, like the wrong gig, the wrong project.
And how can, I mean, if you do have great results, but like you said, they're misaligned results, what are the consequences of that?
Not liking the work you get, not wanting to do the work that comes, not enjoying the
Oh,
customers who are attracted by that strategy, getting known for the wrong things,
hmm.
and having to engage with a strategy that you don't like embodying. Right? Like, is it true that, like super aggressive email marketing, cold outreach to just like hit every possible person in the entire United States is going to produce more leads than a small campaign? Yeah, probably. But if you're a high touch, low volume business, you don't need a lot of leads. You need really targeted ones. Right. And so like I get all the time, I get emails from people that are like, hey, we can help you with da 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 because we've serviced 500 fractional, I mean, you're a fractional, 500 fractional CEOs and blah blah blah. And it's like as a high touch, low volume operation, that's very intentional about how we outreach to people. The fact that you work with 500 people isn't actually impressive to me.
Yeah.
I want to know how many of those people are happy with the results you got them, not how many people you've managed to sell your service to,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I want to see, and I did hire an email marketing company actually last year, and it was not a successful endeavor for a lot of reasons, but they were like, this is the template we use for other brand agencies. Well, like, why would I want to use the same template for other brand agencies? That doesn't differentiate me from other brand agencies.
Yeah.
Like, also, we're not an agency. Also, we're not selling, and we're not selling like a logo pack. We're selling nurturing brand into optimal, like, and we're entering at the, like, to your point, like, we're entering the business at a growth stage, not an inception.
Yeah.
Like, almost never is that the right client for us because they almost never have a budget unless it's a VC business. No business has investment in brand like that on the front end, and I don't work with that
Yeah.
segment of the market for a variety of reasons. But
But I wanted to get into when you are raising the brand, which is your term, for me, and I was just thinking about this company that contacted you and they said, they've worked with 500. And let's say you are starting to work with somebody and they do want to scale to 500. And that's when brand IDQ comes into play because then you need to scale. But how do you help? Just, I guess, talk to me about how brand IDQ helps founders. Um, I don't want to say get out of their own way, but how does it help them let go so that they can actually scale and that they can grow teams and trust those teams to help the brand grow the way they want it to?
yeah, I mean, I intentionally use a lot of parenting metaphors because my kids are 5 and 2. I'm like in it. They're very readily available to me, but I also find them to be very relevant, and they resonate with people. Like, if you are a founder, your brand is of you, but it's not you.
Yeah.
And if you can't tell the difference, just as, I mean, you're a parent, if you can't tell the difference between your child and yourself,
You're in
you
trouble.
you can't raise a healthy child.
Yeah.
If you're enmeshed with them, if they're codependent, if you don't let them fall down and pick themselves up, right? And it's not so different except that you do have to approach the creation of the entity, the energy, the, collective consciousness of the brand differently because it doesn't have any and really anything innate. Like a child comes with their physicality
Yeah.
built. Like, you have to build that physicality. I do like try to stay away from the idea of like building a brand though, because it tends to make people think of it in very like um tangible. It limits what they are able to kind of conceptualize. And the definition of brand that I really prefer is that it's what happens in between all the people who bring the business to life. And we tend to think brand as market facing, but it also has to do with your relationship to your business.
Hmm.
Like, and it has to do with your relationship to your team members and their relationship to each other and their relationship to the customers and your relationship to the customers and your relationship to your reputation in the marketplace. Like, it's all those exchanges and the tension of those exchanges that creates that, again, back to Mukara Meredith, which is, I borrowed her living systems. A brand is a living system. It's not a being, but it's an ecosystem
Yeah.
of beings. And it's alive, the system. And it has these divergent parts and they're converging to make a self-correcting whole. And they're gonna do that no matter what, right? It's gonna happen no matter what. The question is it happening as a default or is it happening on purpose? And if it's happening on purpose, is that purposefulness holistic? Or is it just purposeful decor on top of your marketing campaign and not being carried out in your customer service, in your hiring decisions, in your operational system establishment, right? Which is a lot of times what it is. And so in terms of like helping the founder, I think the first piece is helping the founder tease themselves apart so that they can start to combat that idea that they are the brand, which is something that's just being like, we're just being inundated with that. And you know why? Because the platforms benefit from you as the founder feeling like your business will never succeed if you're not addicted to LinkedIn. That's why. For all of history, the majority of history, the personal brand was something that existed inside of organizations, right? Or
Yeah.
like for musicians or actresses, but like most of the most successful companies in the world, they might have a figurehead, but their figurehead is not the brand. The people aren't bonded with the figurehead. Like, could you tell me a single person that works for Lego right off the top of your head? No.
Not a one.
You tell me anyone that works for Walmart? No. What about REI or Patagonia? These, like across the cultural and political spectrum, the brands, like the idea that you can't bond with a logo is to become very popular, and that's not untrue. But what's true is that you can bond
With the brand.
with the brand
Yeah.
because it is much more than the logo. It's the experience of, and its role is to set, meet, and exceed expectations. That's what a brand is. It's a ecosystem that's role is to set, meet, and exceed expectations. And it's going to do that with or without you, but it can't grow beyond you unless you allow it to. And
Yeah.
if you don't allow it to, you are stifling it in the same way that you are stifling your child if you never let them
Grow
leave the
with it.
house and go off into the
Yeah.
world and learn to make their own decisions.
Mhm.
Um,
I
and
feel
so,
like this is now bringing a, wait, I feel like, sorry, I feel like this is now bringing us full circle back to uh, the somatic work that you've done, the somatic counseling, because even as you're describing this, and I know Meg very well, and I know that she's worked with you on this, that I could imagine Meg literally feeling in her body when you're trying to pull stuff out of her. I can imagine Meg being like, "Oh, no, 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 no." So I feel like is this where you find yourself turning back to the somatic counseling work that you did so many years ago to help coach founders through this process because it's very personal.
yeah, I mean, I think like I wouldn't say we like do somatic work, but what I've tried to do with the Brand IDQ system is build those things in. So, and for anybody who's interested, like the assessment tool, one really full transparency, this is the process that Laurel and I have been working on together for a really long time, where she does the voice and figuring out how to communicate between voice and visuals, and then looking at how frustrated we were when our clients wouldn't take it and like wouldn't be able to translate it to the other lived parts of their business. And so I've been like, what do I need to do? Like, how do I need to frame this to get people to like start to understand? Like, how do I need to talk about it? What are the problems that happen when this isn't done that will combat preconception about what brand is and isn't, right? And so with Brand IDQ on our website, originally it was just like supposed to be a more sophisticated lead magnet. But then as I reverse engineered, because I'm, high integrity and I wanted to make sure that like people could really get some value out of it, I was like, oh, Brand IDQ isn't just this tool on our website, it's our framework
Yeah.
that we use and included in what we call the Brand IDQ profile is your core motivation, the brand's core motivation, the brand's three emotive styles, which is based in the Jungian archetype framework, which many, many people who've paid any attention to branding will recognize like the 12 archetypes. Um, but we tend to take one of them and it's like, a very like rigid persona. But the triad, which I actually have to give Laurel credit for, creates some range, like you don't go into the meeting with your prospective client the same way you go into a meeting with your 4-year long recurring, your best client. And the same way that you don't go into a networking event in either one of those modes, so it gives you that persona range. But then also you have that anchor of that primary motivation, that organizing energy. And then we look at, okay, what are the core beliefs of those? What are the core beliefs of that? What are the needs? And not the need of the client, but like the need of everybody in the orbit, right? So like our brand is all about order, ruler, creator, caregiver. All of those are in the order quadrant of
Mhm.
core motive. Anyway, headiness. But, you know, the idea that like I need as the founder to have boundaries with my brand in the same way that I need my clients to have boundaries with me in order for the brand to be healthy, in the same way that I need my vendors to have boundaries between each other and me, and they're not stepping all over each other's lanes, right? And so you start to think about it more as relational habits, right? And then each brand profile that we create, I think if you take all the different combinations, it comes out to like almost like 300 potential combinations. So while it's like, wow, there's four motives and there's 12 styles, like when you start to mash them all together and there's a lot
Yeah.
of potential versatility there. And the way that those universal things combine under your exact umbrella is what creates your unique expression. And again, it's like I tell people all the time, it's like we love this idea, especially in the West, that like we're so unique. So unique. There's no one like me. I'm the most me that's ever been. And I'm so, but like that can be kind of overwhelming when you're a founder. Like, my business is so unique. I'm so differentiated. But then, like, how could you possibly find a solution that exists in the world if you're the only person who's ever had that problem ever, and it's feels lonely. So it's like actually kind of nice to recognize that like these patterns exist and we can pay attention to them and use them. But so, um, from there, it's like it becomes while our relationships with our clients are very personal and like I text all my clients, like we're buddies, but it's like the whole idea is to kind of take like help you catch those moments when you feel overly invested, right? Like it creates that little bit of space. So we have the core motive, the three motive styles, the profile. And then from the profile, we create what's called the brand integrity statement. And so it says, like, this is how the brand makes decisions. Here are some things that you'll notice when the brand is out of alignment. Like, these are your red flags. Like, here's the mindset that you need to tune into, like, in order to kind of activate the brand in your workspace. Here are some habits you might want to set up in your day to activate these energies. So it kind of like walks you into kind of like method acting, honestly, right? It like walks you into how to embody the brand in a way that like a mood board doesn't.
Yeah.
And
And
so
it
when
sounds like
I
it
can
does
say,
that.
is that what the brand would do, or is that what
Yeah.
you would do?
And then if you have that framework, then it can be more than the founder embodying the brand. Then you get the core team and wider team also embodying the brand.
Yes.
That's how you can really scale.
Yes, and it becomes then like, and I know you have your own expression for this that we chatted back and forth, but it's what I say is the difference between just delegating tasks and being able to confidently delegate decisions, right?
Yeah.
Where at the most introductory level of scaling, you might just be hiring support staff, and that's okay. But like still they're gonna send you back things that need less refinement. I mean, I know so many people that are like afraid delegation ended up being more work because I have to fix everything. And if I had just done it the first time versus having to review and then do it myself and then back and forth and make a training video so it didn't happen again, right? And there's always going to be a little bit of that onboarding. It's always going to take longer at the
Yeah.
beginning, and you can't let that scare you away. But being able to say, like, this is who the brand is. And so also, we've taken it and said, actually just this morning I finally got we've been working on a tool that will take the brand integrity statement, look at the marketplace presence and identify what we call breaches in integrity, where what's being projected out is not what was intended. And then we can say, okay, these are the breaches, and this is the potential opportunity cost of not fixing those breaches. This is the potential like degree of lift required to fix them. It's low, it's moderate, it's high. Here's the cost and recommended services to fix those things. And here's the potential ROI based on your financials.
Mhm.
This is how long it will take for you to see a return on investment. Because even if it's like really true that that's there, if it's not a sustainable investment for the business, I'm out of integrity encouraging you to pay me for it.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to work with clients who are reaching too far out of their financial comfort zone just because it's what a more mature business should do. Like that's not the appropriate developmental direction for you. And um, I'm really excited about that tool actually, and it's been taken way longer to finalize then, but I'm just got it back today and we're gonna start testing it. So maybe that would
Oh,
be a
that's
fun,
exciting.
it should be cool. And yeah, so Brand IDQ is also something I'm gonna be turning into a credential for creative and marketing professionals that are interested in like being trained on the ideology and the framework so that they can deploy it in their business. And if and when they need someone to, backfill complementary services, they can come to us and say, I want to make sure that I'm working with other people who have the same ideology because it's really like in in a perfect world, once a client has that, every decision, not just for marketing, but every decision should be gut checked against that because it essentially becomes the brand, the personhood. It's the personhood of the brand, as
Yeah.
in the same way you would say like WWJD, it's like what would the brand do? It's like you start to be able to like, and especially when you have co-founders who maybe can't agree on the direction and their personalities are clashing. Okay, well, step back. Let's
What
not
would the
fight with each
brand do?
other. What's not best for Tina might not be best for Faye, but like what's best for the brand in the same way parents have to learn to ask that question for what's best for our child.
Yeah.
What's going to make me most comfortable? Not what I would do, what's the best decision for that being over there that is
Separate. That's separate
separate.
from me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I feel like I absolutely reserve the right to pull you back here to talk about how this develops more because there is so much. I feel like there's so much runway with where this can go and how it can help brands, including my own, quite frankly. So, but before we wrap up today, I have one last question to ask you. What unexpected lessons or rewards have come from you going around your own ladder rather than climbing a more traditional one?
I never would have like imagined myself as a business owner like growing up. Like that was not on my list of things. Um, but I would say like probably the most impactful, lucrative, unexpected thing was that when we first moved back here, which I knew I could do because I knew if I needed to, I could create income not based on this economy by reaching out into the onward online, world. So I felt comfortable enough to come here. And then my husband and I were like, or we were just a boyfriend girlfriend at the time, but we were like, okay, um, we had started doing Airbnb in Boulder to supplement our respective incomes. And when we moved back here, we had some experience being landlords essentially with that. And we were like, oh, that's interesting. And the first house we bought was two dwellings on one taxable lot. So we lived in the big one and we rented the small one and it paid our mortgage on the small one. And then all of a sudden we wanted to get a bigger house and we were able to buy a bigger house and rent the small one, paid for both of them. The big one paid the new mortgage. And then we sold that house at the height of the market after COVID and bought this house. And we then last year we sold the rental property and made almost doubled our investment. And like I don't know, like if I had a traditional job where I was a counseling license and I wouldn't have been able to move back here
Yeah.
when my dad got sick without going back to school and getting licensed again. But I was able to just pick up and move. And then I was like, okay, I'm open to different ways to make money. And so, like, let's try this landlord thing. And I knew how to write contracts. So I wrote the lease and registered an LLC as an entity. Like, I had all those things readily available to me. And I had started to exercise this, like, see if this project can make money. And honestly, like of all the, as much as I'm passionate about this work and it's what lights me up, like that was my bread and butter for a long time. Like
Yeah.
it made it possible for me to be very specific about the clients I wanted to work with and to not take on jobs that didn't light me up because I
Yeah.
didn't wasn't, my groceries weren't on the line and my rent wasn't on the line. And I never like my mom would joke with me, she's like, I didn't know I was raising a real estate mogul. Well, I'm not a real estate mogul. I am not a real estate mogul, let's be real. But
A
like
mini mogul.
it's such a common thing here in this area. Real estate is, I mean, everyone's got at least two real estate agents in the family because it's South Jersey Shore. It's like that's what we do. We buy and sell and rent houses to people who want to come on vacation. And so like that was not something I ever aspired to do or aspire to like grow more into. But it
It gave you
was
freedom.
hugely, yeah, huge part of, and now we're like, maybe we'll move back to Colorado because all of a sudden we can afford that in a way that like when I left Colorado, I was like struggling to make $800 a month to pay my rent and you know, trying to, and now we're like, okay, like
Yeah.
I was telling somebody came over the other day to fix the toilet in my office, and the plumber came out of the office bathroom and was like, I can fix this for $600 or I can replace it for $800. But if I fix it for $600, the water's going to run and it's going to cost you. And then I'm going to be back in 3 months to fix it again. And it's going to cost $600 again. And like, there was a time where like $800 was my entire,
Yeah.
and now I'm like, okay, $800.
Replace it.
And all of that is because of the real estate.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love
Yep.
what you've built. I love where you've taken it. And I love how it serves you and it serves others. It serves you first, but because of that, it serves others.
Well, being a parent has taught me that
A lot.
being a parent and being a leader of project teams has really made me get real about how much it costs to run a business and to be of service,
Yeah.
Like I just can't crank out all-nighters anymore and get underpaid. It's not just me. It's my team and it's my family. And it gives you a different perspective on what is actually fair.
Yep. Absolutely.
It's
It
not
gives you,
so
a
like
lot of perspective in general. It gives you
yeah,
a lot of perspective. Oh, thank you so much for coming on today. I so appreciate it. And as I said, I absolutely reserve another bite at this apple because I think that there's more that we can talk about, plenty more that we can talk about.
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's a total pleasure.
Thank you. So that's it for this episode of Around the Ladder. Remember, there is no one right way up. So take your detours, make your moves, and keep carving your own path. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or a colleague who is on their own unconventional journey. See you next time.